Why you going there?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Gospel reading, Luke 3, verse 1 to 6. Page at your Bible, 1229. The preaching of John the Baptist. For 15 years, Emperor Tiberius had ruled that part of the world. Pontius Pilate was governor of Judea, and Herod was the ruler of Galilee. Herod's brother Philip was the ruler in the countries of Iturea, Trachonitis, and Lysanias was the ruler of Abilene. Annas and Caiaphas were the Jewish high priests. At that time, God spoke to Zechariah's son John, who was living in the desert. So John went along the Jordan Valley, telling the people, "Turn back to God and be baptized, then your sin will be forgiven." Isaiah the prophet wrote about John when he said, "In the desert someone is shouting, 'Get road ready for the Lord. Make a straight path for him. Fill up every valley and level every mountain and hill. Straighten the crooked paths and smooth out the rough roads. Then everyone will see the saving power of God." Amen.
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 I've asked a question for my message today. Are you ready? Some people ready for something? I hope. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The thing is, God sends people when it's time for them to hear a particular message. You just don't start out in the first century, for example, and tell people who live very, very segregated lives that all of God's children are worthy and they should all be honored. They weren't ready for that. It took time. And so I would like to talk a little bit about Arcadia, California, and this church in particular, and just showing some people like what I'm doing, some people didn't like what I was doing when I came here. But if it weren't for my predecessors, I wouldn't be able to do it. And two of my predecessors I would like to talk about is David Reed and Madeline Gibbs. David Reed was here in the 60s. And Arcadia was probably the most segregated city in all of California. It was 100% lily white. In fact, I learned this when I was a political science student. And I had to read court briefs that in Arcadia, they had what was called covenant agreements. And so if you bought into Arcadia in those earlier days, you had to sign an agreement that if and when you sold your home, you would not sell it to a long laundry list of people they didn't want. And there are a lot of people here today that wouldn't have been able to live in Arcadia because of these covenant agreements. Especially didn't like Asians. I love that. Because Arcadia now is predominantly Chinese. I think that is really humorous. And Mexicans. Anybody have Latino heritage? Yeah, didn't want any of them. Right? Especially them. And Michael isn't here today. He's still recuperating, but Michael, who's African American, he wouldn't have been welcome here. There were just a lot of people, also of other religious beliefs. They didn't want them either. And so this church was formed in 1952. And I would guess that the majority of people in this church were from Arcadia and had signed covenant agreements. So this is the way the church was when it was founded. But in the 60s, a minister came to this church by the name of David Reed. And one of the things that he liked to do was to invite people to church that were different ethnically in particular. And guess what kind of a reception he got? Not too great, okay? And in fact, what had happened, and I talked to him personally, so I know this for a fact, they didn't throw him out of this church, but he was cordially invited to resign and find a job somewhere else. Wow. They weren't quite ready for this yet in the late 60s. But he forged a future for our church. If it weren't for him, I wouldn't be here today. Because I just wouldn't put up with that kind of a church. I really wouldn't. I like you. I like to look at your beautiful faces. And they're not all the same, and I think it's wonderful. And I really appreciate that. And we have people of different talents. Some people here have certain kinds of limitations that make it difficult for them to worship in all churches, particularly if you are like the church we went to last night. Anybody have fun climbing the stairs? No. Yeah? Some churches are not what you call
user-friendly?
Handicap-friendly. Yeah, they really aren't. In big, steep stairs. Not everybody has vision. Not everybody hears the same here. But we're all together under the same roof, praising God and being so thankful that Jesus Christ is a part of our lives. Then later on, there was another person who came to this church. And her name was Madeline. And church pretty much split in half over her. But the one thing she did that allows me to do what I'm doing, she preached extemporaneously. She preached from the floor, am I right? Yeah. None of this pulpit stuff. Because you know I fall out of pulpits. I just, yeah. Literally, I fall out of pulpits. And it's a different style of preaching. You don't see any notes in front of me, right? I prepared for this over the days, you know, before we came here this morning. And I knew what I was going to talk about. I knew what stories I wanted to tell. But I don't have to read it from notes. Because then it would be blah, 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 you know. I mean, at least to me it is. And so because of her, I'm allowed to preach extemporaneously. People were not shocked when I started doing this. Actually, I started out preaching from notes because I was told they wanted me to do that, and I'm not really a very good note preacher. But then my cat, Esther, had other ideas, and she had a thing for my printer. And as the sermon was coming out of my printer, she was going bite, 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 and yeah. And so I had no sermon that Sunday, I mean, as far as reading notes. And it's like I had to get down here and, I mean, I knew what it was about, and I had to do it extemporaneously. And I felt so much more comfortable doing it that way, that this became a part of who I am. So I can thank these predecessors for making it possible. And also for more people here really taking the gospel of what Jesus Christ gave us seriously. The most important thing to me when I got here back in 1994, it's almost been 25 years, can you believe that? Was that our church would be an open and affirming church. And to me it isn't just about being gay or lesbian or anything like that. To be open and affirming means you affirm all of God's people. That you want all kinds of people to be together. That everybody feels welcome once they come in that door. That they know that they are appreciated and that they're looked upon as a precious child that was created by God. For 9.5 years, I became a broken record. And my mantra was, and who would Jesus exclude from the table? And so it was a very, very intense day. And I remember some of you were there that day. And we were going to vote on whether or not we were going to become an open and affirming church. Now remember, I had already been here for 9.5 years. What made it more difficult is that very same afternoon, I was to get on a plane and fly back to St. Louis, Missouri to go to Eden Seminary for my doctoral studies. And I had already made up my mind that if the vote went down, after 9.5 years of preaching that broken record, that I was going to resign. It's like you didn't get it. You didn't hear Jesus, what Jesus was saying about how he welcomed people that nobody else would. That's who he was. Anybody that was the leper of the day, and we have our lepers today too, they don't have leprosy, they have other things, are not always so welcome. And so I had already made up my mind, if the vote went down, I was going to resign. But I thought, what am I going to do? How can you work on your doctorate and you don't have a church? Because that's one of the requirements. But I had to take a leap of faith. And so in my message that day, I ended with, I challenge each and every one of you. We have pew Bibles, right? I want you to go and grab a pew Bible and see if you can find someone that Jesus would exclude. And I'll exclude them too. I'm not worried about Paul, because he was no Jesus Christ. Love the guy, but no Jesus Christ. And a lot of the Old Testament writers, again, they weren't Jesus Christ. So I challenge you, get your pew Bibles open, and if you can read in the Gospels anyone that Jesus would say, no, I don't want this person at my table, I'll exclude them too. But I had nothing to worry about, because I know my Bible. And I know that Jesus was the one that welcomed everyone, especially the people who were welcomed by others. And so it was the day of our annual meeting. It was in the month of January. And so people voted by secret ballot. We didn't want to have a big confrontation or anything. And some of the people in the church were not all that open at that time. And so the votes were collected. They went into the fireside room, counted the votes. Corinne, you were the one, I think, who announced it. It was unanimous that we became an open and affirming church. I was on such a high that day, I can't even begin to tell you how I felt. Because, I mean, here I was thinking I might have to resign. And people who I didn't think got the message voted to become an open and affirming church. It was the most wonderful experience I can ever explain to anyone. Because I really love Jesus. I love the message that he gave to each and every one of us. There are a lot of people on this planet who aren't held in such high esteem. Maybe they've done things that they shouldn't have done. And maybe they're just of the wrong ethnic group or faith group or whatever it is. But God created each and every one of us. And I was thinking, how can we exclude anybody? If Jesus didn't exclude people, I don't think it would have happened if it hadn't been for my predecessors. Because they led the way, just like John the Baptist. If we hadn't had John the Baptist first, I think Jesus' message would have just fallen on deaf ears. What John did was that he told people, I'm not worried about ritual and sacrifices and things like that. I want you to go and search your heart. I want you to search your lives. What is it that you feel that you need to do better? What isn't working for you? And I want you to admit, this is not the way I want to live. I want to change. I want to reform myself. And after talking to each individual, They would come to him and they'd say, John, I want to be baptized. And baptism really goes back as far as a cleansing ritual in the Jewish faith. Water was always used as a purification rite. And so John would say, I believe you're serious. I believe that you really are sincere in wanting to turn around and change your life. And so he baptized them in a ritualistic cleansing experience that they had. And the idea is once you came up from the water, you felt new. You felt whole. You felt that you were, this was a new beginning. And so that's what he did. And so his message wasn't into bowing on the streets and starving yourself for a couple of days. They had the Pharisees for that. Remember our friends, the Pharisees? Oh yeah, they were fun group. His message was change. Be better. Find your highest self and then look toward that as your goal. And then he led the way to Jesus. But if it hadn't been for him, I don't think Jesus would have really had much of a chance of really getting that message across and doing the kinds of things he did. He said things that really disturbed people, especially when he was talking about Samaritans and holding them up in high esteem and saying, now there was this good Samaritan. Or the story of the lepers who he healed. And out of 10 lepers, there was one of them that was a Samaritan. And he was the only one that returned back to Jesus and said, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. You can imagine his listeners hearing this and saying, there are no good Samaritans, how dare you? But it's because of John that Jesus could do what he could do because someone else had led the way. Think of your own lives. Think of people in your lives that have changed you. That you're not the same person you were when you were 13. Well, I hope you weren't. But think about it. Someone in your life led the way. They might have explained something. They may have modeled something. They may have done something that gave you an aha experience. And you look to them and you say, you know, because of them, I'm now a better person than I was before.
Amen.
God is not finished with any of us yet. And the prophets come by as we need them. And so let's be open to the Word of God and the people that we meet. And maybe we will be the one that will lead the way to someone else. Amen. Amen. If you are ready and you're able, I